I can't believe that all it took was 2 days into March Madness to ruin everyone's bracket.
Ironically, the game that broke the final brackets was the one Purdue lost. Isn't that hilarious?
Bro, I just can't wait. Welcome back to the Caden Pierce Recruiting Center. It's your hosts, Evan and Aiden.
Today on the sports show, we recap and preview some Westfield sports. Adrian gives you a baseball preview, and Rowan updates you on the March Madness. Well, madness.
I'll get us started with some boys volleyball. Last week, the boys went 2-1, beating Lafayette Jeff on Tuesday and Franklin Central the following night. Thursday, however, was a tough loss at HSE. Brody McAfee led the charge on offense in those 3 games, compiling 30 kills with 2 games in double digits. This week they have a tough game versus a strong Brebeuf team at Brebeuf on Tuesday, then a winnable home game on Thursday versus New Pal.
In guys lacrosse news, they went 1-2 this past week, winning over Park Tudor, but losing against Kettle Moraine and Cathedral. 2 home games make up their schedule before spring break: Wednesday versus Brebeuf and Saturday versus South Oldham.
Girls lacrosse had 2 games last week, a win on Tuesday versus Bishop Chatard and a loss on Thursday versus Guerin Catholic. 3 games make up their schedule this week: Tuesday home versus Brebeuf, Thursday at Fishers, and Saturday at Penn.
A new sport begins regular season competition this week. Softball has 3 games, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. The regular season opener is at Decatur Central. Wednesday we play the rival Carmel at home, and Friday we're at North Central. Even with losing a lot of firepower last year, we're a young team and expecting to have a great year.
Finally, girls track ran an indoor meet on Saturday and finished 5th. They, along with the guys, run at the HSR Indoor Finals on Saturday at IU.
Evan, baseball starts next week. They've had a few scrimmages. So how do you think they'll do?
The conference this year will be competitive like it is every year. I'm sure we'll find success. On the topic of baseball, here's our own Adrian Wolf previewing the season that starts in a few short days.
This year on varsity, returning for their senior years are Andrew Nicholson, a pitcher, Austin Knott, an outfielder, Braden Hibbler, a middle infielder and shortstop, Eli Manbeck, an outfielder, Evan Russ, an outfielder, Jacob Culp, a pitcher, Preston Tam, a pitcher, Seth Nana, a pitcher, Ty Anderson, a pitcher and second baseman, Tyler Gentry, a middle infielder, and Colin Lindsay, a catcher and pitcher, who shows to be a significant player this year with a last season batting average of .380, scoring 6 home runs and a critical role player on a talent-filled team. New to varsity are Nathan Bodenberg, a pitcher, Gatlin Pastel, a pitcher, and Alex Rudolph, an outfielder. On JV Green, there are high expectations for Luke Collinsworth, a pitcher and outfielder, Ethan Collings, a catcher, Anthony Samini, an infielder, Johnny Ewing, a first baseman, Garrett Poehler, an outfielder, Jake Russell, a shortstop, Nick Farrow, an outfielder, Beck Jordan, a third baseman and pitcher, Gabe Garcia, a catcher and outfielder, and JP Mears, though currently injured, will be a great pitcher post-recovery. JV White is returning with some new talent coming in with sophomores Aiden Grabowski, Brock Parker, Kay Defendis, and James Kovac. We are excited to see their talent and improvement this year. Overall, these 3 teams have a lot of talent and should be very successful.
If for some reason you can't make it to a home game, Evan and I will be commentating all the games that are held at Shamrock Field, so you can catch a radio-style broadcast of the action. Now, on to my personal favorite part of the show.
I know what's coming.
Evan, I don't think you do.
To delay my imminent torture, here's Rowan giving you your bracket update. And Rowan, please take as long as you want.
Thank you, Evan and Aiden. Now, after a very exciting first 2 rounds, I'm going to talk about the Sweet 16 coming up, and I'm going to predict that round and the Elite 8, which will be in the same weekend. Now, Alabama and San Diego State. San Diego State got past Furman, who upset Virginia in a very shocking upset. But Alabama, they have been one of the most dominant teams in the country all year. Brandon Miller and Javon Quinterly both went off against Maryland. San Diego State, they're a very streaky team, but I'm going to take Alabama here. Now, Creighton taking on Princeton. Princeton, who would have thought they would be here? I mean, a 15 seed getting this far is absolutely shocking, but they have proven a lot of people wrong. Here they are as the 15 taking on a very red-hot team in Creighton. Creighton getting a huge win against Baylor in the round of 32. Princeton absolutely blew out Missouri in the round of 32. I'm riding with the hot hand and kind of an upset, not kind of an upset, definitely an upset. I'm taking Princeton to go to the Elite 8 here. I think this team is just too red hot to be stopped right now, and I think they have proven that they can play with almost anybody. Now, Florida Atlantic taking on Tennessee. Now, I think we were all hoping that Farley Dickinson would have made it to the Sweet 16, but unfortunately they fell short to Florida Atlantic. Now Farley Dickinson, they knocked off Purdue in a very shocking upset, arguably the greatest upset of all time. Sorry, Evan. And Florida Atlantic, they were able to win by a decent amount, even though they did let Farley Dickinson control the game a little bit in the second half. Florida Atlantic, they have a lot of great shooters and they're a good offensive team, but Tennessee, overall, they are one of the best defensive teams in the country. They completely shut down Duke, and I'm taking Tennessee here. Now, Kansas State taking on Michigan State. Kansas State, they looked great against Kentucky. I mean, Marquise Noel, he proved to be one of the best point guards in the tournament, despite being very undersized, and he's a great playmaker who can get hot from beyond the arc. Michigan State, on the other hand, though, they were not expected to be here. They had a huge commanding win over Marquette, and I'm not going to doubt Tom Izzo here, so I'm taking kind of a Cinderella run with Michigan State. Now Houston taking on Miami of Florida. Now Miami, there were times in the game against IU where they completely dominated. Norchad Omier is a great big man, but Houston, they've had some issues as of late as they struggled in the first round against Northern Kentucky until near the end. And then in the round of 32, they were down at halftime against Auburn. So this Miami team, this is not a team you can get down against. But if Houston is a good second half team like they've been in the tournament, I think they could get past Miami. But Norchad Omier versus Jarace Walker, that is a matchup to watch out for. But I'm taking an upset here. I'm taking Miami to go to the Elite Eight. Now Xavier and Texas. This is a great matchup. Xavier, they had a very dominating win against Pittsburgh despite struggling in the first round against Kennesaw State. Texas, on the other hand, they had a big win against Penn State. That was a close game. Penn State is a red-hot team. Texas, I think they could definitely be a Final Four team in that region. I'm picking them over Xavier, considering that Xavier overall is a very inconsistent team. Now, Arkansas and UConn. UConn, they got down against Iona in the first round, and they were not looking good, but in the second half, they prevailed. And then in the second half against St. Mary's, they also prevailed. Definitely a second half team. Arkansas knocking off Kansas in a big upset. UConn, I just think overall their team, the makeup of their team, it is a Final Four team. And I have them getting past Arkansas in a close game. Now for probably my favorite matchup of the round, UCLA taking on Gonzaga. UCLA surprisingly struggled against Northwestern, which is something I did not expect. And Gonzaga, they had a little bit of issues with TCU. So this is going to be a great game. Two teams with a lot of experience, but I'm giving the edge to UCLA because I really think that Tiger Campbell is going to have one of the best games of his career. And Drew Timme, he could get shut down by Amari Bailey in my opinion. I think that will be a great matchup to watch. But I'm taking UCLA slightly over Gonzaga. Now to the Elite Eight. Alabama taking on Princeton. I mean, I'm sorry, Princeton. This is the end of your run. Alabama, the most dominant team in the country. Alabama, you're going to the Final Four. Now Tennessee taking on Michigan State. I mean, what a matchup. A great offensive team in Michigan State taking on one of the best defensive teams in Tennessee. I'm taking Tennessee because of how dominant their defense has been throughout the tournament. Now Texas and Miami, talk about a matchup for the ages. A matchup I'm really liking there is Norchad Omier taking on Dylan Disu. Dylan Disu had a great game against Penn State. This is a great matchup. I'm taking Texas though because Miami, they've proven to be a little bit inconsistent throughout the regular season. I think Texas has the edge. Now UConn taking on UCLA. UCLA, very experienced team. UConn, on the other hand, they've had a lot of dips and dives throughout the regular season, and despite them looking great in the tournament, especially in the second half, I think is the end of their run. I got UCLA going to the Final Four. So those are my predictions for the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight. It should be a great round of games as the first two rounds were. Now back to Evan and Aiden.
Thanks, Rowan. Anyway, where were we?
My demise and imminent doom.
Right. I have a question.
I'm afraid to answer.
How can a team make history and still lose?
I don't know. How can they?
If they're the tallest team in the tournament and they lose to the shortest, Farley Dickinson, led by their fearless coach Tobin Anderson, upset the very overrated Purdue Boilermakers, making them just the second 16 seed to beat a 1 seed ever. But for some reason, this just feels so much more embarrassing. I mean, you have a 7'4" giant and national superstar Zach Edey, who's almost unstoppable, and he had a double-double, yet you still lost. Am I surprised? No. I told you this would happen. I even predicted it a couple episodes ago.
Keep that same energy when Purdue loses first round to Farley Dickinson.
You can never trust Matt Painter in the tournament. You can't trust Purdue. So my last words on the Boilermakers on this show ever is well done. Congrats on making history.
Did you know Alec Pierce has a brother and he plays for Princeton and he's good?
Well, that family is talented, so I'm not really shocked.
Princeton, the Ivy League giant, is still dancing, and truthfully, I'm not very shocked. I am shocked, however, that Sparty and Tom Izzo are still dancing. I had them going out in the first round, and I could not have been more wrong. Oh yeah, and remember when you looked at me like I was nuts whenever I said Kansas was losing around this time? Well, look at me now.
Evan, your highest bracket is 94%.
I mean, that's not bad. Rapid fire, who is in your new Final Four and who do you have as the new champion after the first couple rounds?
All right, brand new Final Four. It was originally Creighton versus Duke and UCLA versus Texas. Now it is still Creighton versus Kansas State, and I still have UCLA and Texas in that other side. So my national champion is Texas. They've showed some inconsistencies in the tournament early. I might have to switch it to probably my favorite team in the tournament, Kansas State, led by Jerome Tang. I love Keontae Johnson. Love Marquise Noel.
So my Final Four is still intact and correct for the most part coming into the Sweet 16 and on. I still like Alabama. I still like Kansas State, even though I don't think I actually had them winning. I'll keep that the same. Gonzaga, I still have winning the West, and Texas is still probably the strongest team in their little region. I don't think much changes in terms of competition. If anything, the competition gets dumbed down a little bit because some of the powerhouses have fallen, such as Purdue and Kansas, and even Marquette, thanks to Sparty. Not a whole lot's changed there. My national champion is still Gonzaga. And just a reminder, next week will be a heck of a show and probably one of our longest, if not the longest episode ever. Make sure to tune in then too, but until that day and time comes, stay breezy and go Rocks.